This is a free sample of the book, Reinvent Ideal, What to Do When You're Depressed and No One Cares Because You're Not a Chick, by Cairo Copeland. The first half of this book is posted right here on YouTube, free for everyone to listen to. If you like this content and want to hear or read the rest, or want to listen to it free of ads, visit reinventideal.com/ideal. The book is available on Kindle, paperback, and Audible at reinventideal.com/ideal. Chapter 3. Google search query. How do I get my ex-girlfriend back? That is perhaps the most common starting point of the men that find the red pill. Something terrible has just happened in their lives, such as being dumped by their girlfriend or divorced by their wives. This is also where society and communities show their true colors, that they don't give a shit at all about the emotional well-being of males. The girl moves on right away, acting as if the man she dumped never existed, and never was there an emotional investment on his part. The mutual friends and acquaintances all take her side or are understanding of her decision, even if it were something so vain and vague like she just wasn't happy. The fempowerment mandate states that she must be, even if it is at the expense of a man's happiness. So be it. Sometimes no one even bothers to check on the guy afterwards. The social imperatives put upon him are that he is just to move on stoically and without a stutter in his step. Man up, walk it off, take it like a man. This search query was how my first client in my personal coaching practice found me. His name was Jose, and he was recently dumped by the woman he thought he was going to marry, Katie. They had met at dance class, where he literally swept her off her feet. After all, she went home with him that night that they met and slept over. The next day, she told her friends that she was head over heels in love with him. He did have a lot going for him. A respectable job, his own house, a paid-off car, a strong social circle, and he was a great dancer. Further, other women wanted him, so by virtue of female nature, she wanted him too. Things were really hitting off when they started dating. It was non-stop outings and sleeping over at each other's houses. They confessed their loves for each other 2 months in and got matching necklaces. Jose even got close to her son, and that's saying something, because he was like most guys, not wanting to be responsible for another man's child. But things began to take a bad turn. They would argue, and often over incredibly stupid things. It was the intensity of the arguments that really set things on fire. The hurtful things they'd say to each other would cut deep. An injury is sooner forgotten than an insult, and women never forget a bad thing said, even after great makeup sex. What really started the downward spiral was that he'd dance with other women at the class. Katie didn't like that. Now, at first, she was accepting of it because, one, he was one of the best dancers, so the teacher often encouraged him to do it, and two, there were lines of girls wanting to dance with him. But it made Katie feel so insecure about herself because the other girls that he often danced with often danced better than her. Then, at his job, he was often yelled at by everyone from customers to the managers. It put him in a bad mood a lot, where he often complained to her, or had a negative outlook on things. This really got her upset and sparked a lot of arguments. And those arguments got hot. She was upset that his bad mood brought her down. He was upset that she didn't lift a finger to help him cheer up, like we'd hope and expect a partner to. She often started these arguments in text messages back and forth while he was at work, which he really couldn't stand. He needed to focus and be on point at his job, but when she pulled this, he had a great emotional distraction. Not only was his relationship in trouble, but his job performance was suffering as a result. He was denied promotions and often scolded by his boss. One day, the text war got so bad that she dumped him by text while he was at work. For the first few days, he was relieved. The reality of the situation and pain of it hadn't hit him. It was great to have his freedom back, to be able to dance with other girls and not take shit for it, but after a week, it sunk in. The relationship he made such a great emotional and financial investment in all went poof. Many of their mutual friends sent all their support exclusively to her and none to him. She got everything out of the breakup, and all he was left with was this mentally taxing job that was getting harder by the day. He decided to try to repair things. He visited her at her house, but she wouldn't let him in. They stood outside talking. He tried to get a conversation going, but she responded with cold indifference. She even tossed many of his things back at him, such as shirts he gave for her to sleep in, which she adored at the time when they were given. He left her house in defeat. She had told him that she wasn't coming to dance class again, but the next time he saw her there, he was taken aback by surprise when she showed up to it with another man. He was trying to heal himself dancing with other girls, but now taken out of the zone by seeing her, dolled up and dressed up to highlight her beauty, and now dancing intimately with other guys. He left in defeat again, staying home from the class for many more weeks. Afraid she'd be there to twist the knife again, he went deeper into his depression. One time, he even sent her a long message on social media, spilling his guts in a private message. He told her how much it hurt him to see her become so indifferent to him, how much he missed the good times they had, and even listed each of them one by one. He begged for a chance to rekindle at least a friendship together. Her response was short and cold, and the gist of it was a no. Things had gotten so bad that he was calling in sick to work, or leaving early claiming to be sick. He dared not tell his boss what was really going on. Expressing the pain we feel as a result of a heartbreak is viewed as childish or immature. This is perhaps the worst salt in the wound dished out at the worst possible time. How cold society is when it comes to men in emotional pain. While we all have experienced heartbreak and emotional pain in some way, shape, or form, the social imperatives toward those in it are downright dismissive. They care not, particularly when it comes to men. The world offers us nothing to cope with it. Thus we feel as though we can do nothing else but sit and wallow in it. As we ache with emotional pain, self-criticism begins, as if the social imperative says we should somehow just keep calm and carry on. We should function normally despite something psychologically abnormal occurring. If he had lost a parent or a child, the story is different. The world shows some sympathy. Work gives you time off, and friends are likely to check in on you. Sometimes that's the case even with divorce, but breakups come with no such luxury. The support given after a death or divorce is merely an obligatory social imperative. In those tragedies, there are financial ramifications that need to be sorted out. That is the only reason the world feigns compassion during them. But when you've been dumped by a girlfriend with whom you've made tremendous emotional investment in, society couldn't care less. Its true colors come to light. This lack of support only intensifies the pain. After 3 weeks of leaving early to go home and grieve, Jose's boss finally called him out on his absences. "What is going on with you?" she demanded. He finally spilled his guts again and told her he was dumped. No compassion was returned, even as his eyes were filling up with tears during this confession. "Oh, for God's sakes!" his boss yelled back at him. "My son couldn't get a date to his high school dance. What's he supposed to do? Stay home and never go back to school again? Are you telling me you're weaker than a 14-year-old? Comparing his pain to a routine high school disappointment twisted the knife in his heart more. Social support and time are the only tools most have when it comes to recovery. Since the first one is denied to us as men, we're left with only the last one, which is one we have zero control over. As a result, we feel more pained. That was when Jose began his Google search, looking for a solution to this never-ending nightmare. Eventually, he came across my Craigslist ad for the coaching business I just started a week earlier, which read, "Are you a man in deep emotional pain? Have you ever been dumped, divorced, frequently rejected, left wondering what you're supposed to do when you're depressed and no one cares because you're not a chick? Do you want to put an end to the pain as fast as you can? Are you tired of feeling like you're being held back? Do you want your life to be reinvented into something far greater than it ever was before this tragic occurrence? Reply by email with the whole story of what happened." Feeling he had nothing left to lose, he followed instruction and sent me the following email. "Good evening. The woman I loved the most just left me a few weeks ago. She won't speak to me at all. My life is going down the drain, and all I can do is watch. I can't eat, I barely sleep, and no one gives a shit. If you have any magic for this, please help me." He included his phone number in the email, and I called it right after receiving it, and I confess my urgency was driven more so by, all right, finally a real customer, than by a fear that he was ready to kill himself. That fear turned out to be true during our first counseling session, which made my guilt my god, and compelled me to see him through it all, even if he couldn't afford the $30 an hour fee for each of the hours he required. Bringing someone back from the edge, I discovered, was far more rewarding than any sum of money, because as of today, Jose is married to a beautiful woman, and is a father to 2 beautiful little girls. But on a larger scale, what the world can learn from this man is invaluable, and no dollar amount could cover its cost. Think of how many new sons and daughters can be born now by the fact that many men will reject the urge to kill themselves because they heard stories like his. The symptoms. In our first session, Jose could barely speak. His voice was extremely timid. This was certainly not the man his friends were used to interacting with. It was clear to me what was going on in his head. Rumination. The constant dwelling on negative and hurtful thoughts to the self grew quickly into anxiety and then depression. When I was just a dating coach, I often saw the guys that were rejected the most, and I could tell that's what they were because their self-esteem was completely eroded. The rejections they endured were from that of strangers that knew nothing about them. Realization of this often helped them forget about past rejections. But this one Jose had to push through was a rejection from someone far from a stranger. This time, it was personal. She knew so much about him, yet still chose to abandon him. These depressing thoughts were completely rational for him to think, and each fed off one another, giving more power and invincibility to the overwhelming negative theme that he was just unlovable. What this causes, by effect, is for the abandoned to adopt self-defeating behaviors that often have them unintentionally push others away. Sometimes, even the others that could help reduce their suffering. This one woman who knew him so well couldn't continue to love him. Thus, no new woman who does not yet know him could love him either. In his mind, that's what he ruminated. With this poison eroding his confidence, it was no wonder that the other girls in his life and a dance class were not interested in him. The increases in self-criticism magnify exponentially. We're down and covered in scrapes, and not helping ourselves one bit by continuing to kick ourselves and pour salt in those wounds. It's all a downward spiral straight to hell for the sense of self-love and worth. The loneliness further poisoned his thinking as he constantly thought about his ex, which only intensified the pain. While this occurred, he had convinced himself that the only way to solve the matter was to win her back, and convince her that the relationship must be rekindled. It caused him to mistake creepy gestures for romantic ones, such as showing up at her house unexpectedly to talk to her, or leaving notes on her windshield. He almost sent her a recording of himself singing a sappy heartbreak song, and he still thanks me to this day for stopping him from doing that. This intensifying of the pain is self-perpetuating as much as the self-confirming beliefs and eventually self-fulfilling prophecies of being unlovable are. Jose's thoughts began to overanalyze every action he ever committed while with her, and now, after being without her. He often asked questions of himself like, why did I say something like that when I know deep down I didn't mean it? Why did I wait so long to call her? She was trying to tell me something earlier and I was just too damn dumb to pick up on it. Our first step was identifying the effects of this emotional pain that was pouring all over him and recognizing that pain. The people around him, family and friends, offered him no recognition of his feelings. They offered him only platitudes and cliches. They all meant well, but no one understands. After a few weeks of it, when all he was craving was a recognition of his basic humanity, they started to shed themselves of their sympathies on the matter. They began to ostracize him and ignore him. They wished for the energy-draining, butt-hurt bitch boy to just stop bitching. The lack of give-a-shit his community had was perfectly acceptable for the simple fact that he was male. Because bouncing right back after getting your teeth knocked out and facing the world asking for more hits in the face is what's expected of you. It's like entertainment for a sadistic audience we call society. Since no one sympathized with him, he remained isolated. At first, it wasn't by choice. Friends stopped inviting him to gatherings. and his phone calls were often cut short by the recipients. Texts were unreturned, and very clear cries for help on social media were scrolled past. He then isolated himself as a reflex to protect himself from an uncaring world. The only thing that looked remotely friendly to him was a piece of rope, long enough to hang himself with. Thankfully, he had the thought of doing a Google search on the matter and a Craigslist browsing for help before that point came. Even in less severe circumstances, though, emotional pain of this magnitude is often unchecked by men with regularity. It went untreated for Jose for so long that it grew in severity enough to impair his ability to function as a person in the world. Never would we let a scrape on our shins go unattended to if it stopped us from being able to walk. But emotional wounds are often left uncared for until they kill our capability of living our lives. Diagnosis. Naming the monsters in the room. Our second step in our sessions together, progressing towards his recovery, was to identify the causes of his pain. Surely the lack of give a shit his immediate community and the world at large had for him was a cause, but it was merely coincidental with the greater ones. Starting with the breakup itself, when it occurred, it hit him like a shock that convinces you that you're living in an alternate reality. You see it so explicitly with the deep disconnections displayed by others who go on about their business like nothing happened. But you cannot do the same, because within, your thoughts and feelings are being devastated as your romantic heart has been mutilated. Worse yet, everybody expects you to just go about your business and pretend the hell inside your heart is non-existent. But what is perhaps most terrorizing to one's feelings is the fact that this pain is perpetually force-fed down their throat. Losing the person you love because they died is hard, yes, but you have no choice but to accept it, because there's no hope or chance that they could ever come back. However, when they've dumped you, the pain you are in because of them can be ended by them at any time. They hold the immediate magic pill to fix the way you feel, but they choose not to. They choose to let your suffering continue, like if you were dying on the sidewalk and they walk right past you, even step on you without noticing. A deeper cause to all this emotional mayhem that is always unacknowledged in the cliched advice you receive from others post-breakup. We are neurologically hardwired to bond with others, and once a bond is made, the mind will do everything it can to maintain it. The withdrawal and its effects are no different from that of a drug. Lacking a cause of dopamine rushes that you were used to getting will drive anyone to the edge. To replicate this mayhem on your mind, try quitting something cold turkey, something like smoking or drinking or pornography. It was of vital importance for Jose to realize that this is where his pain was germinating from. Without this knowledge, he was left to believe that the true cause of his pain was that his soulmate had rejected him because he was unlovable. But these thoughts are merely stories that the mind tells itself as a result of withdrawals from a chemical addiction that the other person sparked. You must remind yourself of this when these withdrawals and their resulting negative thoughts attack you as well. Further, within him was a growing fear that this soulmate was his last and best chance to have the love of a woman, something all guys dream of. The fear was worsened by the fact that being publicly committed to her left him with no other options to fall back on. Being out of the dating market for so long, he didn't believe there were better options out there for him. The real fear was that if he were to end up with another, he'd be settling for someone far less attractive and compatible as Katie. And the whole time he'd be in a relationship with this replacement, he'd wish he was still with Katie. She managed to ruin his next relationship before he even got into it. Pseudo-solutions. Early in the aftermath of the breakup, he was offered much advice from his colleagues, but as you would expect, it was often the same bad, cliched advice. Sure, they all meant well, but nobody really understood. When someone has become so much a part of your life to the point where you almost take them for granted, and they suddenly disappear, it's like losing a limb. Onlookers can sympathize, but they truly have no idea what life is like for the limbless now. Venting. They told him to vent his anger out, get a punching bag, scream some death metal, and also let the tears drop. You gotta get it all out, they'd say. This advice is deadly to the mind and toxic to your personality. Never follow it. They say that if you vent your anger, it will reduce the stress caused by holding it in, and preventing you from lashing out at others you'd regret lashing out at. But at its core, what is venting? It's complaining, albeit justified complaining. The problem with complaining is that once you start doing it, you're more likely to keep doing it. Aggressive behavior and negative vibes will increase over time when you let this beast off the leash. While the punching bag, stress balls, and screaming into a pillow may feel great in the moment, it's never great enough to no longer need to do it. Further, it's surrendering your power to the person that hurt you. If Jose gave in to his anger, he'd be right back under Katie's spell. The anger, as a result of her actions and acting on it, meant his thoughts continued to dwell on her, which only bred more anger. The idea of venting has spread all throughout our cultural conditioning thanks to influential figures like Aristotle and Sigmund Freud, who believed a cathartic moment was what was needed to make a positive change, and it was adopted by fiction writers and creators, best exemplified with Batman and the Punisher, whose anger drove them to lifelong crusades against their wrongdoers, and all that were like them. But what's forgotten about this is that their revenge crusade consumed their whole lives. There is great power in being able to put out the fire inside you with water or wisdom, rather than throwing more fuel on it with venting. Talk to friends and therapists. Everyone told him, if you need someone to talk to, I'm here. Thankfully, he never took them up on it, but it was more so out of shame, and really, they were only saying that out of obligation. Being male, his upbringing burned into him that there was something fundamentally wrong with him if he ever cried, particularly in front of others. The problem with those making the offer is that they could not offer a helpful response back to his cries of pain. As men, we are born to be problem solvers and fixers. When we highlight a problem, we don't do it as women do it, which is just for the sake of highlighting it and centering a conversation on it. We do it in order to solicit a solution to it. When one never comes, we're left with more frustration than we previously began with. Now, certainly a professional therapist has the skills and abilities to help, and since my practice is what led to this chapter being written, I would never say that it's not a viable solution, but we can't run to one every time we're dumped and rejected and given the cold shoulder of the world. Date other women. One of his few male friends told him that the best way to forget about his old girlfriend was to get a new one. This would have been useful advice many years ago. A big part of the pain was caused by a scarcity mindset that made him think he blew his one and only chance. But in today's dating world, this is terrible advice. Hungry to heal himself, Jose jumped right onto the usual dating apps and sites, but the usual results every frustrated male has came to be. He'd see a girl on the site he knew he could have a real connection with. He'd send her a decent-length, thoughtful message, only to hear nothing back. This further perpetuated the perception that he was unlovable. Then, there were a few times that he did match with someone, but that ended up being just as bad, because the girls that he did match with were a lot like Katie. He took that as a message from the universe that she was meant for him, and he blew it. When I had a look at his settings on these dating apps, I could see that his preferences for women to match with were just like Katie. The same height, hair color, eyes, attractiveness, tastes, and answers to the questions. The universe only knows what you tell it. Therefore, it was not the algorithms of these sites that certified he belonged with Katie. It was only himself that did that, which I couldn't hold against him because his mind still hungered for her so much. Move on. But perhaps the least helpful of all advice given to him was to just move on, followed by another cliché, time heals all heartbreaks, how much is up to you. This delusional line of advice is implying that he needs to somehow erase his memory of the long time he was with Katie and go about his life like she was never part of it. Only someone looking at him externally could say this. If only it were so easy. The myth of moving on. While many guys will yearn to have the magical moment of getting back together with their ex realized, others instinctively know that they must move on. They can feel that the breakup is really holding them back in their lives. But they also know that there exists a difference between knowing the right thing to do and actually doing it. The first time I spoke in our initial counseling session, after Jose had gone on for almost an hour about the grief he felt, were these words. Loss creates an opening in your life. If you fill it with grief anxiety and depression, you can never create anything new in that space. Hoping something profound like that would have an immediate effect on him, I let the silence linger, but after a moment I could see it did nothing for him. While our bodies can heal from an injury very well on their own, our minds are not capable of such a thing. There is an enormous difference between wanting the emotional turmoil to stop and making the steadfast decision to make it stop. The decision to make it is difficult because we're often unsure that we can. What truly makes it difficult to let go is in the guilt, fear, and anxiety over cutting the cord permanently. When the decision is made to expunge your ex from your mind and your life, you are letting go of something that is far more beautiful and precious than she ever could be. And that is the hope of reuniting. The fantasy of undoing the disaster. That must be dropped. It is no different from when you have a crush on a female friend, but are too afraid to make a move. What is paralyzing you from pursuing her romantically is that she doesn't feel the same way. The hope of having her is crushed. That hope you have is something very beautiful, perhaps the most sentimental that men can get. And sadly, for many, that hope is all that they'll ever have. The hope that one day she'll realize that the best guy for her was you all along, right under her nose. A mythic trope that's been burned into our collective cultural conscience by shows like The Big Bang Theory, when the beautiful Penny realizes that the nerdy nice guy Leonard was the best man for her all along. This exists only in the world of fiction. It is the work of fiction writers as an escape from the real world, because the real world is not like that. The hope may cause you to act out. It manipulates you. It fools you into thinking that desperate, frightening actions will be received as romantic gestures. Your mind is tricked into believing that some cryptic social media post will be read by her and analyzed for deeper meaning, when in reality, she only scrolls right past it. There have even been cases of guys that went past the point of no return, acting on this hope, resulting in them being issued restraining orders or charged with stalking and even incarcerated. Society convinces you that these strong feelings of yours are not normal and you are losing it. But acting as a result of a broken heart is not a sign of a mental breakdown. It is only a response to emotional pain. When this pain is gone from our hearts and minds, our more stable self can return. That is what Jose needed to be reminded of, who he used to be. The mind, however, does not allow this so easily. It is governed by imperatives of protection. It will work against you every step of the way. It will find ways to justify the urges and continuing the habits that set us back. Treatment. There was a set of actions that could penetrate this default gravitation of the mind, and that's what my treatment plan was composed of. Step 1. Go dark. The first assignment Jose was to complete was to immediately cut off all contact with Katie. All contact. This meant no seeing her in person, no calling, no texting, private messaging, no following her on social media, or opening her stories on Snap, and removing himself from any group chats that she was part of. The slightest moment of any sight of her would immediately destroy all the hard work he was to put in. You must realize this and do the same. Even if you believe there is a hope of getting back together with her, it is better to disappear. Your mind is going to trick you into believing that you can just say one more thing to her and it will fix things, but it never does. Only in the absence of something does the heart grow fonder of that something. Right now, in the immediate aftermath of the breakup, emotions are white hot. The impression of you that she currently has is very negative. You being there, playing any part in her life, is only going to enhance her negative view of you, no matter what you do. Even if you're buying ice cream for a long line of children or helping an old lady cross the street, she'll think you're only doing it out of desperation for her recognition. You see, women are solipsistic by nature and believe every little thing that occurs in their presence is about them, and this solipsism is heightened during the aftermath. Despite anything they may tell you, the true reason women dump their boyfriends or divorce their husbands is due to a loss of emotional attraction. Their highly emotional nature causes them to feel things on a very intense level. Often the attempts to plead for rekindling the relationship come across to her as something very irritating. Remember, during the relationship, how dangerous it was to irritate her while she was in a highly emotional state. It's just like that. You may have heard it directly from her in her justification for the decision to dump you. She may have said something like, "You're not the man I fell in love with." Katie had told Jose, "You were once a fun-loving, happy guy. Now you're always miserable and negative." When expectations are not met, when a constant pattern of behavior that could be counted on no longer occurs, they go into disarray with their thinking. None of this is to justify her dumping you. Her loss of attraction may very well be her fault for having unrealistic expectations of you, but you can't fix her. You can only change yourself. So never plead nor beg. Women have compassion for other women, for children, and for animals. They have none for men. The emotional desire they once had for you cannot be negotiated, nor can they be reasoned into recreating it. The positive feelings of attraction she develops, while not random, are generated in a spontaneous way. It's why they say women like to be swept off their feet. They can't be attracted by being told they should be. This emotional attraction that they've lost for you can only be reignited by allowing the current feelings of emotional repulsion to die down and fade away. Only your absence can inspire this. The absence must last for at least 30 days. A longer time period is encouraged and may even be necessary. Whatever was the length of time the relationship lasted for, the absence needs to last for at least 10% of that time. Being able to rely on her being part of your life became like a drug that your mind was so accustomed to having. The only way to rehab off this drug is cold turkey, because she's not going to participate in any program to wean you off it. In fact, you should expect no input or help from her in your recovery. Hoping that she will is only going to bring you more pain, because that hope will never be fulfilled. Instead, acceptance of cruelty is a powerful step in circumventing it of its power. No contact whatsoever, not even a Facebook like. But what if it's her birthday? Or she has a major death in her family? One tiny message is warranted. I don't think I would do anything on the birthday, but if someone passes away in her family, I'd just keep it to one sentence. "I'm sorry for your loss." And nothing more than that. And despite the horrific, unbearable temptation to do so, do not respond at all if she messages you back. Step 2. Mimic her mind. My whole life, I don't know if I even really existed. Joker. Have you ever wondered why it is that a woman can move on from a failed relationship, particularly when she initiated the breakup, and go about her life acting as if you never existed? There is a scientific explanation for this. Rollo Tomasi of The Rational Male calls it the war brides syndrome. During tribal times, one tribe would conquer another, kill all the men, and keep the women for themselves. In order to survive, the women needed to learn to forget about their previous lovers and bond with their captors. A mechanism was developed in their minds to cope with it, and evolution has made it stick with them throughout thousands of years. This is how she can act so indifferent to you after the breakup, like you were never a part of her life. Jose felt this, and it was what drove him to the edge. When he'd see Katie again at a dance class, and she'd ignore him, pretend he wasn't there, or even pretend he never was there. All the emotional investment he made in her was zeroed out, like watching life savings evaporate in a bad mix of bankrupted stocks. Years of labor and sacrifice erased. This is what drives many men to seek vengeance. They'll commit acts of a stalker and risk losing what they've built their lives up to be, all for the sake of getting to show her. Some even commit the more tragic act of suicide, like the Marilyn Manson song, "We are the nobodies, want to be somebodies. When we're dead, you'll know just who we are." But never does this accomplish anything. Many suicidal fellows are under the impression that if they do something big and loud enough, she'll realize the error of her ways and spend the rest of her life living in guilt, a punishment fitting for her deed of making him spend the remainder of his life in loneliness and misery. But she never does. In fact, after his death by his own hands, he's called selfish. "He was so inconsiderate to take his own life," they'll say. "Look at the pain he caused others." And this female primary social order that we live in will never pin responsibility on her for his premature passing. It will instead give her a free pass. After a few days go by, he's forgotten about. The obituary's ink fades from the collective conscious of the community. The ugly truth is enough to put hate in the hearts of many. It inspires MGTOWs and the black pill, and I fully understand their anger. I don't agree with this social imperative of banning all compassion for men in pain, but I don't make these social imperatives, and neither can you. We can only acknowledge them as a reality and adjust our lives accordingly. All negative emotions you face will be caused by a common theme: resistance to acknowledging and accepting reality. Anger, depression, frustration, and grief can be tuned down by first acknowledging the reality they create. And the same is true for the social imperatives that make them a reality. But what are we to do instead? The world and the woman couldn't give a shit less if you're dead. In fact, they'd probably be relieved. The world has one less toxic male, and the woman has one less stalker. That's the script they follow word for word. Your best move is to burn the script page for page and rewrite your own. Instead of killing yourself, live your best life. Step 3. A better life. Instead of seeking vengeance on her, build a life that is far better without her. Build a life she would wish she could be part of still. Build a life that screams in her ears, "I'm so glad you dumped me, because my life is so much more awesome now since you did. You really were holding me back, bitch." Living your best life is your best revenge. But do this not out of revenge. Do this out of love for yourself. Her leaving you created a void of love you relied on receiving. Now you yourself must fill it. To begin with this new way, you must adopt her mindset and mimic it. Forget she even existed. The war bride syndrome. Throw away everything she gave you. Even better if you burn it. Leave no trace of her in your life. Already you should have cut off all communication with her. You don't have to worry about her asking for the stuff back. If she wants it, she should come see you face to face and look at the man she abandoned. Not to inspire guilt, but dread. Women can never be guilted into coming back to you, but dread does work. Dread that they made a terrible mistake. And you inspire that anxiety by living your best life and making it more awesome than it could ever have been with her. To start on it, expunge her from your memory and life. This, of course, will be painful because when you expunge her, you are also flushing the hope of getting back with her down the drain as well. That hope is something we so desperately cling to. But for a remedy to the pain caused by this hope, remember Batman and Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. Halfway through the movie, Bane has captured Bruce Wayne and puts him in a prison that is a deep pit in the ground. It is possible to climb out of it, but it is extremely difficult. The light from the top of the pit is the only light this prison has, and Bane explains to Batman that this was intentionally chosen to heighten the despair he wants him to feel. The torture he would endure would not be of his body, but of his soul. As Bane is looking up at the entry of the pit, he says,
"There's a reason why this prison is the worst hell on earth. Hope. Every man who has rotted here over centuries has looked up to the light and imagined climbing to freedom. So easy, so simple, and like shipwrecked men returning to the sea from uncontrollable thirst, many have died trying. There can be no true despair without hope."
The hope of getting back together with her, the chance and the mere existence of such chance, is what's killing you. To rise above it, you must let go of that hope. To let go of that hope, you must hope for something greater, that your life will be much better without her. And that hope is one you can actually plan for and realize. Let that hope be the one that drives you, wakes you up in the morning, and pushes you not only to move on, but also move up. Don't move on without her. Move up without her. While there is pain in letting go, it is far better to experience the pain now rather than later. All things must come to an end. Every relationship, romantic or not, will reach an end at some point. Even if you were to have married her and never get divorced, one of you was likely to die before the other. We all die alone. It's never talked about, but it's true. End-of-life care is often sold to us with an image of an elderly grandfather on his deathbed, surrounded by his loving family, holding hands as he peacefully passes on. But this is not how it ever happens. Many people die alone in hospices, with fluids filling up their lungs, surrounded only by nurses attempting to prolong their lives to another gasp of suffering. Now, I say this not to depress you or encourage nihilism. I say this not to enrage you. I say this so you won't be enraged when the end of your life does not meet your expectations. Just how the red pill is not here to enrage us, but to prevent our rage when life does not meet our expectations. One of you was bound to die before the other. Would it not be more painful to lose them after a lifetime spent together than to lose them after just a few months or even a few years? Do not grieve the end of a relationship. Instead, celebrate, for you have been spared far worse pain. Instead of digesting the loss of an emotional investment 20 to 30 years in the making, you experience it now. When this concept is fully understood, it makes it easier to keep the frame in your next relationship. It becomes easier to walk away from things that do not make you happy. If you're always ready to walk away, especially when disrespected, no woman can harm you emotionally. Understanding that all relationships end, and when yours does, even seeming prematurely, you can rejoice in the fact that the universe had mercy on you by not inflicting greater pain upon you. If more time was spent in said relationship, and more fond memories created within it, the pain of it failing would be far greater. Instead of vengeance or reunion, seek to make your life so much better without her. If you want to hurt her back as badly as she's hurt you, make your life so wonderful that she regrets no longer being able to be part of it. Living the better, happier, more prosperous life is your best revenge. She'll realize she threw herself overboard off the best cruise liner there was. Make no attempt to prove that point to her. Let her discover it for herself. Say nothing about it to her either. The female mind is already a master tool at rumination. What her mind conjures up naturally with dread and anxiety that she let her best man go will be far more powerful than anything you could say. Step 4. A notebook. Quite often our greatest fear is the unknown. The inspiration of our deepest, strongest anxieties comes from not knowing what awaits us in the next few minutes. If we only knew, if only a certainty could exist, our lives may be much easier. For Jose, not knowing was killing him. Why would she do this? I must know. I need closure. I don't understand why she would abandon me. He constantly replayed every scenario, an argument they had in his head. He analyzed every moment for subtext and deeper meaning. There was just no rest from the replays. But still, no certainties of why he must live through this suffering ever presented itself to him. He was left only to wonder. The unknown cannot ever be made certain without being able to peer into the mind of the woman that broke your heart. But the unknowns can be named and uncovered. Which one is the correct one is irrelevant. What matters more is getting them all out there in the open, where, while exposed to the light, become disinfected. The fire of the light shed on them burns them to ashes, and robs the unknown of its power. Knowledge is the enemy of fear. The more we can know about a subject, the less it scares us. The next assignment was to get a notebook or a journal of some kind and begin writing in it. Not just anything, but write very specific things. Things that are bugging you the most and dominating your thoughts. The problem is that you're carrying your thoughts around with you, everywhere, and they're getting heavier and heavier to bear. But what do you write? Well, for one, the worst-case scenario. Start with what could be the worst-case scenario for your life resulting from your breakup, and exaggerate it as much as possible. I mean, are you going to lose your income, your life savings, or your house because she's gone? Chances are she contributed to none of those things. Are you going to lose your ability to have sex forever? You've only lost one partner you can do it with, but there are still many others out there that you'd enjoy. It just probably won't be that meaningful right away. What's most likely is that you lost a reliable pattern of activity in your life, as couples often fall into routines, and a few mutual friends. New patterns of activity only take a few weeks to adopt and get used to. And those mutual friends were only your friends because you were with her. They were fake. Are you really that upset about losing them? Second, write about why she was wrong with you. The mind plays a very cruel trick on the recently abandoned. It makes you think that the person that left you was perfect in every way. The distress is intensified when reminiscing on the relationship, as only happy times are recalled. When something is lost, the natural negativity of our minds decides to focus solely on the benefits we lose, and it's slow to remember the drawbacks we'd be happy to get to live without now. So write those things out. Write out all the things about her you didn't like, all the times she nagged you over stupid shit, all the days with her that she ruined by causing drama. And here's a big one. All the things you did for her that she showed very little to no appreciation for. The point of this exercise is not to be negative. The point is to counterbalance the happy, perfect image your mind tries to convince you the relationship was. You're in a great deal of pain because you remember a relationship that was all sunshine and roses. It's lost from you that there were some times where it was anything but ideal. There's a fundamental flaw in our brains that the remembering mind is far different from the experiencing mind. Your experiencing mind is the part of your consciousness that lives in the present and makes its observations and judgments in the present. For now, your experiencing mind is focused on these words in front of your face. Soon it will focus on you getting up to take a leak, scratch an itch on your neck, or take a phone call. Its focus is not only on what you're currently doing, but also what you're thinking and feeling as you do it in the moment. A moment is such a vague term, but suppose we were to give it an exact measurement, say 3 seconds. Putting aside times spent in sleep, you'll experience about 20,000 moments a day. What happens to each thought, feeling, and impression during those moments as they pass? Now, the mind discards 95% of it permanently. Can you really remember what you were thinking and feeling in this exact moment of the day 1 week ago? Of course not. We retain less than 1 in a million of our experiences. The ones that are retained are picked up by your remembering mind. This part of your conscience collectively analyzes and organizes the few things your experiencing mind hasn't ditched. Despite the natural negativity of the mind, it's very choosy about these stored experiences and often opts to only keep the good ones. It's quite strange and ironic that while the mind forecasts the future to be nothing but bad, it does this while looking back at the past that's nothing but good. Like a mutual fund prospectus says, past performance is no indication of future results when it comes to how we think. The point of this exercise is to reverse that order for you. Look back at the relationship as a bad experience and your future without it as positive. If at this exact moment last week you were taking a bite out of the best snickerdoodle cookie ever, you may remember that. But if you were waiting in a long line at the checkout, you've probably forgotten that. However, all that's necessary to retrieve that unpleasant memory is a revisit to that store. It's time we revisit unpleasant memories in the relationship. Are you happy? It depends which self you ask. The experiencing mind is often less happy than the remembering mind. The experiencing mind often throws almost everything away. The remembering mind is error-prone and leads us to make incorrect conclusions. Because of these miscalculations, you'll end up prizing brief bursts of pleasure too greatly at the expense of appreciating any tranquil, self-sustaining joys. You may also fail to realize that you had no such joys. When I had Jose do this exercise, he realized there were a ton of things he did not enjoy about his relationship with Katie. The more he thought about it, the longer his list got, and the final one was too long to repeat here, but some of the highlights are: she was extremely messy. Her house was always a disaster. She took her family's side over his whenever a family member of hers was clearly in the wrong. She was super insecure. If he so much as glanced at another woman while they were dancing, she was a bitch to him the rest of the night. If he danced with another woman, and in the dance community, the code is you dance with everyone, like them or not, but she was a bitch to him for days after that. Whenever he hung out with his guy friends, she complained that's all he ever did. Whenever he picked up extra hours at work, she complained that that's all he ever did. Whenever he did something sweet and special for her, the appreciation had an average shelf life of 5 seconds. She drove her car like a lunatic. Some days, when he'd go spend time with her, the first 2 hours were spent arguing just to get back in good standing with her over something that happened a week ago. When she cooked, and he did anything such as adding a little extra salt to his plate, she got upset and said things like, "Oh, I guess my cooking's not good enough for you." She policed his activity on Facebook and Instagram, such as who he followed, and what posts he liked. If it was ever an attractive woman's post, she brought it up. Even if he turned down another woman's flirtations with him in front of her, she got upset and let it ruin the rest of the night. It went on for several pages. This exercise alone was almost enough to help him get over her. When left to his own devices, his mind naturally gravitated to thinking about how good things were with her. But when forced to put pen to paper, his mind couldn't think only about those good things. This is why I stress writing these things down. Don't just think about them. It's far too easy for your mind to dismiss the thoughts and go back to idolizing her, but it's incontrovertible when forced to focus. A third thing to write is future plans for happiness that don't involve her. For some guys, this seems like a difficult task, but if they think about it a little more, it's really not. Something that can be said about letting women in your life is that they will try to run it for you. The rational male terms it as dream killers. Have ambitions and aspirations that you'd like to achieve in your lifetime? You put the possibility of those achievements at risk by getting into a relationship with a woman. Now, this isn't to say no man in a monogamous relationship can ever be successful in his own personal ambitions. It's to say that each person only has a set amount of time, say 75 years, or better said, 27,000 days. You can't be in two places at the same time, nor can you do two things giving both 100% at the same time. Progress toward achieving the dreams of what you want in life is going to be slowed down when you are in a long-term exclusive relationship. You see, women require you to entertain them. Notice how social conventions dictate that a man always plans out the dates. He must initiate things, progress them, and punctuate them. The things are often mutually enjoyed, and, in many cases, more so by her, such as movie nights, where she picks the movie, and dinner dates and friendly get-togethers with her friends. I remember one past girlfriend of mine that dragged me to her friends' events, and I despised every second of it because they were friends that I didn't even like. What made it worse was that I had more important things to be doing because I was still in school. But that didn't matter to her, and if I expressed displeasure at all, she'd have gone off the deep end about it. They will pull you into making them the focus of your life. Now, this isn't a calculated conspiracy on their parts, but it happens because the guys involved are often far too lenient to allow it to happen. A woman should only be an addition to your life, secondary to your purpose. Never should they be the purpose. In my first book, Never Ghosted Again, I stressed getting on your purpose. If you haven't done that already, now is the time to do it. Do not get shacked up again before having the opportunity to realize your full potential. Now is the best opportunity to explore what that full potential is. Two precious assets that men in passionless marriages would kill to have again are two assets that you now have as a result of your breakup: time and the ability to reshape. With marriage and monogamy come responsibilities and liabilities that eat away at these assets. You no longer have that burden. The most beneficial form of power you could ever seek and hope to attain in your life is not money or connections, but rather a greater degree to the amount of control you have over the little time that is your life. Reignite the dreams you sacrificed when you locked up with her. They're right where you left them. Even better, dream bigger. Jose had dreams of owning a storage unit facility. It was like rental real estate investing, but even better because it was missing the thing that often makes rental property unprofitable: people. He had to shelve that dream in order to maintain his relationship with Katie. Now that she was out of the picture, he improved upon that dream. He's now aspiring to own a storage facility where everything is automated and the unit renters can book, lock, and pay for a storage unit without ever having to see a facility worker to make it happen. It is never dangerous to set the target too high and miss. To use a cheeseball line, shooting for the stars means if you fail, you'll at least hit the moon. The dangerous thing to do is to set the target too low and hit a bullseye. My dream was always to be a writer, but a past girlfriend of mine often took up too much of my time that I had hoped to spend writing. And after that relationship ended, I was able to get right back to my keyboard, and the quality of my writing got much better, partly from the fact that I was doing it more often. Write out the dreams you want to accomplish, and have the time to undertake them now. Don't limit this section of your journal to just ambitions. Also, write out the pleasure-seeking things that you'll now get to do. For Jose, it was going to dancing events anywhere in the world and have the freedom to flirt with all the women he wanted to. For you, it could be going to events that she had no interest in. It could be hanging out with the friends she bitched about you spending too much time with. It could be applying for better jobs that require relocation because she's no longer anchoring you to your present location. Langston Hughes once wondered what happens to a dream deferred. My answer is that it gets reignited by a man after a breakup. And the fourth thing is to write out your thoughts as they occur. While these exercises are intended to combat the negative thoughts that presently infect your thinking, there's still the problem of new negative thoughts coming out of nowhere. See, the mind is incredibly talented at finding new things to bitch about. New thoughts will arise and attempt to hijack and take a hold of your outlook on life. They must be deflected right away before they can get a foothold of your thinking. To do this, whenever a new thought about your relationship arises, scribble it down in your journal. Then evaluate it. Is it a negative thought or a positive one? What provoked it? How does it make you feel? What credibility does it have? What use is it to you? Ripping apart your thoughts like this can rob them of their power to affect you. Just the mere act of making an observation about a thought of your ex can really decrease the distress it may cause. When thoughts of her arise, simply say to yourself, that's interesting. I had a thought about my ex. Oh well. Run it through this exercise of writing it down and ripping it apart, and then move on about your day. Throughout your daily life, make the intentional decision to go through each day making observations. Notice the patterns in the carpet, or the cracks in the walls, reflections in windows, etc. Then, when a negative thought arises like, I can't believe she dumped me, simply notate that thought non-judgmentally. I had a thought about my ex today. The purpose here is to direct attention to the present instead of the past. Journaling these thoughts will inspire you to have less of them, so long as you commit to the practice of writing them out. If you're forced to go through this time-burning exercise of writing them out and analyzing them, you'll want to have less of these thoughts so you can spend your time doing things you enjoy more. Further, the more you rip into them and rob them of their power, the less likely they are to perpetually self-generate. One of the last things I had Jose do was work with mental models, new ways of thinking that become incredibly useful as to override the same old negative thought patterns. You can't help but dwell on her, but what if it were possible to dwell on her in a more effective way? The good news is, it is. I have put together new ways to think when the thoughts of your ex begin to haunt you, starting with the beauty pageant. Imagine conducting your own beauty pageant. Your ex is part of it, as she was no doubt probably easy on the eyes, but she's not the only one there. You also see every other attractive woman in your life, or every attractive woman in your vicinity. If you have trouble doing this for a lack of a social circle that includes many women, I'm sure you can find them. Anyone can download Tinder or scroll through the People You May Know section of Facebook. There's bound to be beautiful women in your network. I don't recommend using Tinder or Facebook to meet these women. The purpose of this thought experiment is not to meet more women, it's to get a perspective. With all the women lined up, including your ex, who do you crown the pageant winner? It is unlikely to be her because what she did has tainted the way you see her. So if you wouldn't choose her again, why dwell on her? The right questions. If she is in fact the winner of the pageant, then you need to ask yourself the following questions. Sure, she's pretty, but does she measure up to the important standards I have listed? And even if you didn't choose her, it's helpful to get out the journal and write down the answers to the following questions. Was she truly worth all the time, money, and energy spent on her? Can you look back over the long term and truthfully say to yourself what you got in return from her was worth the investment? Was she making you, or at least inspiring you to be a better man? Perhaps in the beginning she was. So what changed? Write that down. And if she was never making you or inspiring you to be better, she should have been dropped a long time ago. Because if you're not improving your life, not growing, then you're dying. Did her values align with yours? I don't mean on trivial matters like religion and politics. I mean on practical everyday use matters like money, how you choose your friends, how you treat a stranger, or, my personal favorite, did she naturally want there to be peace and harmony between the two of you throughout the relationship? Or did it seem that she found more pleasure in making drama and issues that hindered such peace and harmony? Was it all about the sex? Was the sex even worth the struggles and sacrifice? Is it truly impossible to find that sex elsewhere? Was she worth suffering for? Everyone that seeks a relationship seeks it only thinking the good parts, like shared joy, fun experience, and great sex, but no one searches for one anticipating arguments, sacrifices, and dutiful obligations. Considering all you had to do to make her happy, especially at the expense of your own happiness, was she worth it? Is it possible you were settling with her? The dating scene is one difficult place to be, and we rejoice the moment we can exit it because we found someone. No more awkward approaches, asking for the phone number, setting up dates, and waiting for them to happen, hoping she won't flake. Let's not forget ghosting and rejection. Is it possible that you stuck with her because it was the path of least resistance? Can you do better? Did you not deserve better? Is it possible you're just afraid you won't find someone else, or that it'll be difficult to find someone else? And be as honest with yourself as possible, and as detailed as you can be when answering these questions. Leave no thought undocumented. Even if the thought is ridiculous, it's best to write it down so you can see indisputable evidence of how ridiculous it is to think it. Another thing that's helpful is affirmations. Now, they seem silly and cheesy to say, especially when spoken aloud. To take awkwardness out of them and enhance their effect, I recommend playing some epic hero music loudly and then reciting the following affirmations. Do them in the morning and at night. Even do them in between if necessary, or if it's possible it could help any. Stand like Superman, straight up with your shoulders back and chest pushed out, and say to yourself, there's not a single woman in this world who can make me feel I'm less than the man I truly am. There's not a single woman in this world that can decrease my value as a man. My life will be so much more awesome now that she's out of it, and she'll wish she could still be part of it. There's nothing she can do to make me feel inferior. Breaking up will be the best thing that ever happened to me. And the last exercise that I had Jose do was write a letter. What you do in your journal is address a page to her. Make it a letter that you'd write to her that would include everything you'd say if you had her attention and she were unable to interrupt you. In real life, that day will never come, but you still need to get these words out. Here's your chance. Write down everything you feel about her. Write down what really happened to the relationship as you saw it from your side. What are the incidents that occurred and continue to play over and over in your mind? Those moments where you think, if only I had done this. Tell the stories in the most detail possible. What led to the dreadful day the breakup occurred? What warning signs of these were foretelling the impending separation? When did these signs present themselves? Was there any sight of them from the start? Most importantly, what could she have done better? There were two people in this relationship that were supposed to be committed to each other. Leave nothing she did off the hook. But never send her this letter. She probably won't read it. If she even looks at it, she'll skim it and cherry-pick out parts of it. You will not get the reaction from her you hope. And she'll never apologize. She'll only twist the knife. Instead, tear these pages out of the journal and write this final line on the last page. There were some happy times with you while I shared part of my life with you. I learned a lot about who I am and what I want. So now it's time to experience a new chapter in my life. Sign your name and stuff the pages in an envelope. Now, burn it. Watching it all go up in flames will do wonders for your mind and setting it free. No longer are you being held back. The past has turned to ashes. Ashes from which you will now rise and re-enter the world. Additionally, when I had clients come to me for help with this problem, something that was prescribed to them and stressed more heavily, because it was prescribed to everybody, was to exercise. And in every one of my books, I stress how important it is to do it. And that's because nothing but good can come from it. Never in the history of humanity did anyone exercise their way into a miserable life. And the best form of exercise is lifting heavy weights. Creating physical strength will inspire mental and emotional strength as well. And it has been shown that heavy lifting kills depression and anxiety. The scientific explanations behind the hormones and changes at the cellular level are out there for those who really want to know, but the proof is in the appearance. When you look and feel sexier It's hard to let depressing thoughts blacken your skies. It can ignite the desire of others with just a look. Some guys have a long way to go before they can be good at flirting, but that skill becomes needed only half as much when your appearance can do half of the flirting for you. You have a lot of free time now that your relationship is over. More importantly, you have the freedom to decide what you want to do with that free time. Make the wise decision and use it for the betterment of your body. You will easily regret not working out enough. You will never regret going to the gym a lot. Whether you transformed your physique or not, the time spent in the gym does something for you mentally. It is never wasted time. You want to give an enormous middle finger to your ex and show her how foolish her decision was to leave you? Get in the best shape of your life. If she is ever to see you again, her reaction will be, "Whoa, he got hot. Why did I leave him exactly?" Do not ever let your appearance confirm that she made the right choice leaving you. Make her regret it. Make her understand that you had the ability to be this hot all along, but it was her that was holding you back. Or make her believe she simply did not deserve the best version of you. The happiest people don't have the best things. They just make the best of what they have. You have one body, one life, and one chance to make the most of it. You must not let so precious a thing slip away from you for the sake of a stupid decision made by a dumb, self-centered bitch. Also, find abundance. It is in your nature to crave what you once had before. It's perfectly human to want to rekindle your last relationship, believing that it will only become stronger for the second time around after surviving this breakup. The truth is that it never had the strength to begin with, which is why it did not survive, and that strength cannot be developed now, no matter how idealistic the two of you are. Deep down, in your most raw of human nature, what's causing you to want to return to her is the scarcity mindset that you'll never meet another one like her. And this is an enormous myth that we must mutilate. It feels like she was your best option, and hope for long-lasting love only because it's convenient to feel that way. You made a great investment of effort and hard work to get close to her. Now that investment has become a sunken cost that you feel compelled to recover. So much time was spent with her. It will take so much time with another woman to get that same level of joy in the relationship, we tend to think. But that only makes the point I'm trying to emphasize here. Money can be remade. New memories can be created. The output of your love can be re-energized. But your time can never be returned. The time you spent with an ex has now become wasted time as it has led to nothing. Why allow her to waste another moment of your time? Any second of it spent strategizing or even hoping to rekindle things with her is precisely that, a further waste of your time. Here's the truth. Women are not scarce, but your time is. According to the Census Bureau, women outnumber men in all but 9 states in the United States. Every 30 seconds, a girl turns 18. This next one is not a statistic to celebrate, but I bring it up only to provide optimism to those guys that fear all the good women got grabbed up and locked down in a marriage by others. In the United States, there is one divorce approximately every 36 seconds. That's nearly 2,400 divorces per day, 16,800 divorces per week, and 876,000 divorces a year. The average age for couples going through divorce is 30 years old. So every year, about 1 million 30-year-old females become available. There is no shortage of women out there, but there is a shortage of guys that they want to date, marry, and stay married to, as evidenced by the divorce statistics. Also, the fact that 66% of those divorces were initiated by women. You hear the complaint from them all the time, where have all the good men gone? The majority of guys are not considered up to par for a woman's standards, especially when she lives in today's world that tells her to constantly keep increasing them to impossible heights. The majority of guys are out of shape, and they dress like bums, they work loser jobs, they obsess over video games, and watch porn to the point where they can't get erections if they had a chance to get real sex. The bar has practically never been lower for the young man that does his best to make something of himself. He only needs to do more than the others and learn the techniques of allurement. Corey Wayne estimates in his book that only 3% of men really understand what women want and what they respond to. Thus, this 3% has virtually no competition. How accurate this estimate is can never be figured out, but it doesn't matter. We see it every day. Substandard guys going about their substandard lives with no aspiration to improve, and women constantly complaining about the lack of good men out there. Again, not a statistic to celebrate, but males are also dwindling in numbers with the suicide epidemic. The tragic irony behind it is that while their suicide is often caused by their lack of access to women they desire, the actions and behavior modifications necessary to prevent their gravitation towards suicide will also grant them that access to those women they desire.
Thank you for listening to this free sample of the book, Reinvent Ideal: What to Do When You're Depressed and No One Cares Because You're Not a Chick, by Cairo Copeland. If you enjoyed it and want to hear or read the rest, or want to listen to it free of ads, visit reinventideal.com/ideal. The book is available on Kindle, paperback, and Audible at reinventideal.com/ideal.